Today's recipe is looking at bread. So we're looking at making the bread dough and then doing some shapes with it. If you don't have all of the individual ingredients, you can still do this recipe by just buying a little pack of bread mix where you just add water into it. So it's a really good way of practicing the kneading and the proving and doing the shaping, but without having to buy all of the individual ingredients. So it's a good recommendation if you just want to literally buy the bread mix, which you would find on the flour aisle with everything else, and probably more readily available than actual flour at the moment. So I've got my ingredients, which is flour, strong bread flour, yeast, I've got sugar, I've got salt, I've got oil, and obviously I will get some water as well along the way. I'm going to also use some poppy seeds at the end just to add a quality finish to my bread, which I'll show you at the end. We've got mixing bowl, sieve, a jug for the liquid, a baking tray and a spoon, and obviously we'll need extra flour for the work surface too. So I'm going to go through the ingredients with you first of all of how we make the bread dough. So we're using strong bread flour today, and strong bread flour has a strong gluten content in it. It's got high gluten content, which is what gives bread the elasticity if you knead it correctly, and that's what will help the bread to rise. So we need to really stretch that gluten through the kneading process to give a good rise, to give that good strong structure that bread comes with. So you can see large majority of ingredients in bread is flour. I'm then going to add a teaspoon of yeast. This is a half teaspoon, so I'm going to put 2 of these in. And the yeast is a microorganism, and that's actually going to, it's dried yeast, but we're going to activate it so that it starts to breathe carbon dioxide. And to activate yeast, we need to give it warmth, we need to give it moisture, we need to give it food, and we need to give it time. So the time comes with the proving process, which I'll explain separately. Now we have salt. Salt is there for flavour, but it also controls the yeast. It keeps it in line, stops it breathing too much and creating an uneven rise. So we don't want to put the salt onto the yeast. So put the salt in, it's half a teaspoon. Just put it down the side out of the way so it doesn't touch it. Salt is something called hygroscopic. Hygroscopic basically means it likes water, so it will take all the moisture away from the yeast and it can actually kill it. Teaspoon of sugar. The sugar is our food, it's our energy for the yeast. Obviously adds a little bit of sweetness as well and helps with the overall colour, the caramelisation within the bread, as well as something called dextrinization, which is the browning of the starch molecules. Oil we're going to add in. Oil extends the shelf life, and again, shelf life means it makes it last longer, keeps it fresh for longer, but it also gives it a little bit of colour as well. So you're adding about a tablespoon of oil, so just a really good glug into there. And now I'm ready to add the water. So I'm going to use some boiling hot water out of the kettle, and then I'm going to add cold water into it to get a lukewarm water. Moisture, as I said, for the yeast, but also that warmth to get the yeast to start to activate and start to breathe carbon dioxide, which we call fermentation. I'm just going to get the water. And what's important with the water is that you don't add it all at once. It's very difficult to take moisture back out if you put too much in. So we're going to make a well, which is a little hole in the centre, and then we're going to add about half of the water. Now it's up to you. You can either use a spoon or you can just go with your hands, depends on what you feel like. But you're just wanting to start to combine the flour with that water, and you'll see that some parts will start to clump together and then others will still be quite dry. So obviously we need to add more water. So I've got parts now that are clumping together. Add more of the warm water in, again not all of it, and start bringing that together to form a dough. Will get your hands a bit sticky if you're not using a spoon. As long as you're not putting too much water in, you should be absolutely fine. And you can see now mine is starting to clump together, but there's still some flour in there as well. So try and push as much of it as you can together, and if you've still got dry parts, then you can add a little bit more water again. And just keep adding little bits until you've got all of your bread flour and dough combined into one manageable piece of dough rather than all the dryness. So I've now got, let's just scoop the last bits of flour from around the outside, I've now got a manageable piece of dough there. So I'm going to next move on to the kneading process with you, so I'll talk you through that next. So now I've taken the bread dough out, I've just popped it onto a little bit of a floured work surface. Try not to use too much flour because that can really toughen the dough if you've not got your ratios right. Just put enough just so that it doesn't stick. And we're using the heel of our hands, so the bottom of your palm of your hand, a little bit like the heel on your foot. And we're wanting to push down and push away, and then fold, push down and push away. So you're using this stretching and pushing action for about 10 minutes ideally, and that is called kneading. That's stretching that gluten, those strands. So we've got, if you can imagine, lots and lots of very tight elastic bands inside here. So they're quite restrictive, like a brand new elastic band or a hair bubble. You stretch it and it pulls back tightly, but the more you start stretching that elastic band, the more flexible it becomes, which allow the bread to rise as that yeast starts to produce carbon dioxide. So I'm going to carry on now for 10 minutes doing this kneading, and then I'll come back to you to explain the proof. I've been kneading the dough for 10 minutes. You'll be able to see it's a lot smoother in texture as I've really stretched all of that gluten. So this now is going to go into a bowl, and I'm going to cover it with a tea towel, or you can put cling film over it, and leave it in a warm place for about an hour. And what happens now is that yeast starts to ferment. So the yeast has got its food, it's got its moisture, it's got its warmth, and now it needs the time, and that's the proving process. So you put it in a warm place, not in an oven, just in somewhere that's warm, just within the kitchen is absolutely fine. And it allows that yeast to start breathing that carbon dioxide and really starting to activate, ready for us to get the bread dough risen. Now that the bread has been proving, I'm going to remove it, and you'll notice it has actually gone a lot larger in size. The longer you leave it for, the bigger it will go. And what we do now is just very, very quickly knock it back just so that it's back to its original shape and ready to be shaped. So I'm going to go on to a close-up now. I'm going to show you how you plait bread. Quite similar to plaiting hair, but I'll show you the process, and then it creates a very, very effective quality finish that you can show off to your family. So with the dough, I'm going to break it into 3 even pieces, like so, and then each one I'm going to roll so it's long and thin. So we want it to be almost like a piece of hair, so not as thin as one piece of hair, but like as thin as a section of hair that you would be plaiting yourself. So you want to do that with all three pieces so that we can then pop them together. So you're just rolling and pulling out at the same time so that you can get them to the correct shape. Do this last one, and then you're going to line them up. If I do it this way, then you can see, line them up like so, pinch all the top back together, so really knead it back together so that it holds. And then you are going from the outside into a new center. So I'm going from here to this as a new center. Then I'm going to come across to this center and across and across, always going to the middle of the other 2 pieces. And then we get to the bottom, again really squeeze those together, tuck it under, and then hopefully you can see the plait like so. And then that can go onto the baking tray like so. It might actually be a recommendation if you just pop little light coating of flour underneath it. And now if you want to add anything like the poppy seeds, which I'm going to add, I'm just going to brush a little bit of oil over the top. This will also give it a little bit of a glaze, so I'm just going to pour that oil all around the bread so it will help with the colour. And then I can just very carefully put the poppy seeds into my hand, sprinkle them over, and that will add a little bit of a glue to hold those poppy seeds on the top and give a really good quality finish. So I'm going to plait the other one and then put those in the oven, and I'll show you the baked result. Now that both my bread shapes are done, I'm going to pop these into a preheated oven on 200 degrees gas mark 6. Obviously I have just done plaits to show you that skill. If you go onto Pinterest or Google, you'll be able to see lots and lots of very different shapes that you can also have a go at yourselves. It'd be really lovely to see lots and lots of different inventive shapes with our bread. Just remember not to roll them too small because they go quite crunchy. The bread has now been in for about 15 to 20 minutes and is ready to come out and be checked. So I'm going to show you how to check it. So as you can see, it has risen extremely well. Slide off the baking tray. That plait is really visible now. So what you do very carefully, obviously with oven gloves on, is you just tap it and you'll hear like a drum sound, and that just shows it's hollow all the way through. There's no more heavy, dense, raw dough inside. It is cooked all the way through. So I'm going to transfer that now onto a baking tray and leave it to cool. So have a go at the recipe. If you can come up with some inventive shapes and share those, that would be fantastic.